And welcome back. We have been talking about the issues plaguing the city's health department. Now we want to talk about the medical and developmental consequences lead exposure can have on children.
So joining us this morning are UWM professors Michael Carvan and Jean Hewitt. Now, Michael, you have done a lot of research on the potential contaminants of heavy metals in drinking water and the environment. What is your concern when you see what's happening here in Milwaukee?
Well, one of the major concerns is the fact that there are kids that are being exposed to lead. And that will result in developmental problems as far as cognition and potentially behavioral problems. And it is a broad problem with lead. Some of it comes from the water. A lot of it comes from paint and potentially soil. And so there really has to be a comprehensive plan to address lead coming from all the sources. And while water may be a little easier to define exactly where it's coming from, we need to have a broad approach.
Jean, do we have this broader approach?
It depends on who you're talking to.
Okay.
So, and I think one of the problems is that people don't know very much about lead and the sources of lead. So it has a whole gamut of sources, include everything from the paint that's on houses, remodeling that releases paint and other things in the soil, growing vegetables directly in the soil as opposed to raised beds and so forth. So there's a whole array of things that we have that are leaded in our environment, and we do not have everybody on board in terms of what those sources are and how to avoid them.
We've really been concentrating on the children because, again, you said it's the developmental issues that we talk about and the concern we have. What does that look like for someone who may not know that their child has been exposed to lead and seeing those effects?
Well, the exposure begins as the fetus is developing, when the woman is pregnant, in terms of exposures, and the effects are in terms of the IQ being reduced, and even at low levels of lead in the blood, we know that we have a decrease in the intellect because of that. And of course that affects one's learning, one's behavior, one's thinking patterns, one's impulsiveness, and we even have linked it to violence in the community. So lead is a huge issue for our children.
And we have known this for years, right? About what lead can do.
Since the 70s.
So what can, as we look at this within the context of what's happening within the city health department, is there something that says, here's what's missing, here's what needs to be done?
Well, one of the easiest approaches is actually, if we're thinking about lead in the water, the easiest approach is actually to get on-site filtration of the water and have it, make sure that it's properly installed, make sure that it is changed on a regular basis.
Sounds like a simple solution, is it?
And something that was already being done, started.
Yeah, so it is a relatively simple, but long term it's very expensive.
I see.
So the idea, and so I actually had a class at the School of Freshwater Sciences that did this cost-benefit analysis.
Okay.
And long term, it is cheaper to replace the laterals. Oh. But in the short term, it's much cheaper and actually much more effective to put the point of use filtration in people's homes. So the idea should be is if we put the two together, where we put the on-site filtration in right now and everybody who has lead laterals, and then replace the laterals on a schedule that is sped up compared to what the city has been thinking about, then that would take care of our problem, and it would protect those households that actually need it.
So basically a 1-2 punch would knock this out.
It would knock out the lead from water.
Right.
Exactly.
The paint is the other big issue. Jean, from your perspective, I mean, is there anything else that the health department should be doing, can be doing? And we also, in terms of the importance of testing, and are those things being done?
The paint issue is you have to remediate it.
Sure.
And that's an issue for landlords. So we have, particularly in the inner city, an issue of houses that have been in disrepair, are in disrepair, and are not being appropriately remediated. So that's a huge issue that has to be taken care of. That's one of the things that is costly and it has longer term. There are ways to adhere the paint onto the surfaces, so there are sort of the same kind of short-term fixes that should be done.
on the waterfront? Lead in the water?
Lead in the water, yes, the lead in the water is put the filter on the faucet.
Sure, that is a good solution.
So you have some short-term and longer-term things that need to be done. We also have paint on the soil, and so covering up the soil, everything from grass and so forth to have less access to the soil and dragging it into the housing
All
unit.
right. Thank you
Appreciate
so
your
much.
input on this very important topic.